Welcome, welcome. Today we're going to touch on some principles of basic pattern making. So many times obviously when I teach, I never know what you all know and what you don't. My background is pattern making. So I try to teach you the details of pattern making because I feel like it will make your job simpler, easier. And there's many who say, I don't want to make patterns. I don't want to learn patterns. But even if you don't want to make patterns, knowing the rules of pattern making will greatly help you. I push. We did a DVD on basic pattern making, $50, cheaper than a book you can buy out there. We have an online class coming up, basic pattern making. The goal is to get you to understand the whys and the hows of how that pattern operates. Over the years, there's been so many methods that have been made up by those in the sewing industry, not in ready-to-wear. Basic pattern making is a method of creating the flat pattern and draping, but basic pattern making is the way of making the flat cloth into dimension. It doesn't need a method. It doesn't need anybody to make it better. I'm not sure why that happened in the home sewing industry, but it doesn't need anything or anybody to make it better. It's simple. It's straightforward. It's just really that easy. So my goal is to help you see that. People will say to me often, I love your methods. And just for clarification, none of it is my methods. I know I've said this often, but it's not my methods. It is the methods that I've been taught. It's the methods that are used worldwide in the pattern industry, in ready-to-wear, French curves, all of those things. None of those things have been made up by me. I'm just simply the messenger. And so my goal is to help you understand. So today we have a short excerpt from a basic pattern making video on buttons and buttonholes, adding them, taking them away. And if you understand that, the top that I have on is the pattern of the month. Last month it was $3.50, Stephanie's blouse, and I've turned it into a t-shirt by taking away the buttonhole front, etc., etc., etc. So one pattern will become much more usable into many different looks if you understand the basics. And that's my goal, is to help you understand those basics and then just have fun by implementing them into all the different garments that you can. It's just fun. So the goal is to have you have as much fun as I'm having and love what you're sewing. That's the goal. So enjoy this short excerpt on adding buttonholes. Taking them away, obviously, is the opposite to any of the garments you make, whether it be blouse, t-shirts, jackets, skirts, pants, anything. Enjoy, and thanks for watching.
This is an example of a buttonhole closure. The only thing we've done to the bodice front of the garment is just extended the width so that there's room for placement of the buttonholes, so that as the right lefts the lap, the buttons and buttonholes will lay over one another. The first thing we do is we have to determine the size of the button that we're going to use. In this example, I'm going to use a 1-inch button. The width of the overlap should equal the radius of the button plus 1/4 inch. So in the example of a 1-inch button, the radius would be a 1/2 inch. We'd add a 1/4 inch to that, and we'd add a strip of 3/4 of an inch wide. This now becomes our new pattern piece. 3/4 of an inch is added to the bodice front, and it's all cut as one. Buttonholes are always on the right side of the garment. Buttons are then placed on the left side. The distance that the first button is placed is, again, the radius of the button plus a 1/4 inch. Other buttons are then placed at stress points. The bust line is an important place. I'm sure many of you have had blouses where there are no buttons at the bust line, and what happens is they gap or poke. The waistline is also a point of stress where a button should be placed. How many buttons are positioned between the waistline and the top button are up to you as a designer. The size of the button would make a difference, and also the number of buttons that you wish to have. Buttonholes begin 1/8 of an inch out into the bodice overlay and extend back into the body of the garment. The buttonhole length is equal to the width of the button plus the thickness of the button. Rough buttons require a little larger buttonhole than your soft, smooth buttons. Vertical buttonholes would be used when no movement is desired with the garment. Horizontal buttonholes are used when a little bit of movement is desired. In a skirt, for an example, a horizontal buttonhole would be used to give a little bit of movement after a big dinner or an evening out. Vertical buttonholes are usually used down the front of a blouse to eliminate movement and to create an exact fit. Let's review the basic rules of buttons and buttonholes. Rule number 1, make buttonholes on the right side of the bodice front in women's apparel. Rule number 2, the width of the overlap should equal the radius of the button plus 1/4 of an inch. Rule number 3, the distance from the neckline to the top buttonhole equals the radius of the button plus 1/4 of an inch. Rule number 4, one buttonhole should be located at or near the point of greatest strain, which is the bust line. Rule number 5, the space between the waistline and the bottom button should be similar to the space between the rest of the buttons. A belt buckle is considered as another button in the space plan. Rule number 6, buttonholes begin 1/8 of an inch out into the overlap and extend back into the bodice garment. Rule number 7, the buttonhole length is equal to the width of the button plus the thickness of the button. Rough buttons will require a larger buttonhole than smooth buttons.